this demonic compendium video came out before Yone, and some of Yone's lines, among some things that we know about demons like Evelyn, suggest a different way of looking at this chart. And for those who don't know, I've spent a fucking metric fuckload of time analyzing the lore charts from World of Warcraft. So I'm excited to share my thoughts with you. And I will try to back some of them up with some references from the official wiki and from things like Fiddlesticks' own short story. This also came before Neela, correct? So there's no mention of Ashlesh as one of the 10 kings, but that is something that we will talk about. So I'd like to watch this Necrit video, Demonic Compendium, see what he's got to say, see what he thinks of it, and then provide some of my own thoughts. So yeah, let's check it out.
Well, if you happen to like Fiddlesticks, I got good news for you. Besides this video, there will be at least one more, where we will cover Fiddlesticks' full story.
I don't think anyone likes Fiddlesticks. I don't think he's even a popular champion at all. No one seemed excited for his lore, not even a little bit. No. Lame champion. The Fiddler!
That's because besides Fiddlesticks' bio, he also got a short story to celebrate his release. That one is called Voices. And if you have already heard Fiddlesticks' voice lines, you kinda know what that story will be about.
Pretty fucked up.
But those kind of horrors are not really the point of this video. Because today we will have a look at something very interesting when it comes to the overall lore of Runeterra. Together with the new story about Fiddlesticks, Riot also released an image that seems to be the demonic origin tree. Or at least it looks similar to the Vastayan evolution tree.
And it's probably meant to look similar on purpose, considering that Vastaya and demons are alleged to be sourced from and pretty heavily connected to the spirit realm. So one of these could be seen as a tree branching up, where the other could be branching down, but we'll talk about that.
This one is way more horrifying. I wanted to dedicate an entire video to this image because it is very special.
Could also be a root system branching up. We'll consider that as well.
All the other art that is considered canon in the world of League of Legends. This picture was specifically released with somewhat vague information so that people could create their own theories about it.
Which is awesome.
And since people know how much I love theories, you know what's about to come. But what's even worse, the writer responsible for Fiddlesticks' story and the person who created the very idea of Fiddlesticks told us that this image is a theory crafting gold mine.
It looks like one.
And it could be because every little detail you will see here has a meaning. Now, I don't want to claim that I discovered all the hidden secrets already. In fact, instead, I want you to tell me if you discover something I missed. Because again, this image is supposed to be a gold mine for theory crafting.
Sure.
So pretty much every detail will be linked to something. But enough with this overly complicated introduction, and let's have a look at what we have here. Hey, this is me from the future. I just quickly wanted to say that this video will really be all over the place. And that's because there is simply too much information hidden here.
Good.
You've been warned. This parchment is called the Demonic Compendium.
Does WoW release stuff like this? Yeah, they sure do. They normally do it in things like books. So, this is something that I have spent fucking hundreds of hours analyzing and theory crafting on. This is a titanically aligned perspective of the cosmos in World of Warcraft, designed in a way that kind of puts everything in its own little category. It's quite deceiving and full of little hints and things to discover. So I reference this very often. It's something that I am quite familiar with and proud of my analysis of, and so I'm excited to share with you guys what I think about the Demonic Compendium as well. So, yeah.
And on Universe, its description gives us some context. It is a fragment of esoteric lore, discovered after the attack on the Noxian fortress at Phalor. The author, or authors, and provenance are unknown. That's all it says here. But I just quickly want to remind you what Phalor is. Phalor is an island where Syndra was locked. Now, if you don't remember, Syndra is an Ionian mage with so much magical power that she simply can't control it. Usually this magic is triggered by her own emotions. And when it so happens that half of your family doesn't even like you, suddenly you become unstable and very dangerous. But eventually the spirit of Ionia itself was done with her, and to save the land, it buried her in the Dreaming Pool, which is a special pool of water hidden underground where those who are submerged in the magical waters sleep forever. Of course, because Phalor is an island closest to Noxus, it was overtaken by Noxus, and that's why there is a Noxian fortress now.
Makes
or
sense.
at least there was. In the most recent story about Syndra, Syndra ripped the entire fortress from the ground, and she floated away with it. The point is, the Noxian fortress around Phalor probably knew a thing or two about magic. Perhaps that is why they took over Phalor. The theory is that Noxus wanted to use Syndra as a weapon. So one of the reasons why the demonic compendium was found in Phalor was because the fortress probably hosted a couple of Noxian warlocks.
That would make sense. It does say the authors and provenance are unknown. So I feel like that does kind of leave open the possibility of it being a translation of something found in Ionia. It doesn't necessarily have to be purely Noxian creation. Azakana being listed on there, I feel like might be a bit of a hint at that possibility, because that is an Ionian term for like lesser personalized demons. And we'll talk about that at length today as well. But I just think it's important to consider that because Noxus is an expansionist empire, it wouldn't surprise me if they incorporated things that they had seized from locals or conscripted people to offer their input on something like this. It may not be purely and only Noxian, but just something to think about. It has been suggested, I've seen in comments, that maybe LeBlanc is the author. I don't know if there's enough to prove that, but perhaps it's an interesting thing to consider.
But now we are drifting from the point of this video again. Just remember that this document comes from Phalor in Ionia, from a Noxian fortress that probably had some warlocks.
Cool.
I am making sure you know this just in case there are some secrets I missed. But now let's have a look at what the parchment actually contains. Although it looks like this shows us the origin tree of the demons, you need to remember that this was written by some kind of a warlock. So what we see here is not 100% accurate.
Yeah,
this is just what people figured out so far.
Yeah.
So if the story later reveals that the
or what they think they figured out as well, you know.
Information shown here is different, that's probably because the Noxians didn't know everything yet.
Yeah.
Looking at the writing on this parchment, one may think that this is Oknun, which is the language of the dead. But you need to remember, I don't think the realm of the dead has anything to do with the demons. If anything...
Probably not. The realm of the dead is part of the spirit realm as I understand it. So it could, but I haven't personally seen anything that suggests that yet.
Demons are more tied to the spirit realm, so maybe this writing is the one we see in the Z comic.
And this is from 5 years ago, so yeah, but yeah, I mean the spirit realm and where Mordekaiser is, I mean they're one and the same. Like it sounds like the spirit realm has different pockets and different kind of areas in it that are perhaps localized to the, you know, beliefs and structures of their reflections in the material realm. So where Mordekaiser is and what he does, you know, has its own like little realm and land, right? It's very similar perhaps to the World of Warcraft kind of Shadowland structure where they're all part of the Shadowlands, but each different zone is unique and different in its own way, informed by different things. Midna Raknun was his name for that realm. Good to know. And that's connected to the Immortal Bastion, if I'm not mistaken.
Shen fights one of the spirits. But either way, I don't think it is Oknun. We see that at the very top the tree starts with fear, and then it separates into delirium, nightmares and secrets, bliss, frenzy and obsession. Now a lot of people think that these names represent different demons that we know. For example, Secrets is Raum, which is Swain's demon.
Which is also supported by the fact that there's like a multi-eyed raven skull right next to Secrets. You know, I would definitely say Nightmares would be Nocturne. I would agree with that.
Nightmares would be Nocturne. Obsession would be Tam Kench.
Perhaps Obsession and Addiction are very similar. But I wonder if there's still something there to be, kind of specified. Because I'm pretty sure Fiddle remarks to these different entities what their like affinity is. Like I'm pretty sure Fiddle says like things like nightmares, addiction, stuff like that in his character interactions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he does. Like identifying what kind of demon or what their alignment is. Yeah, he does when he sees them. I thought so. Yeah.
And so on. But I don't really think that's the case. Besides this, before people start counting to 10, yes, we should remember the phrase, the first of 10, which is how Fiddlesticks refers to himself. But it was mentioned.
Well, I would also throw out there that Fiddlesticks is known for generally repeating what he hears other people say. So it may not be that Fiddle calls himself first of 10, end of men. It is, to me, seems more likely that that's something that he heard someone else say probably about him. So whether or not that's actually the case, I think is open to interpretation and what it actually means to be the first of 10. But we'll discuss that more.
Many times that even though Fiddlesticks is the first of 10, the other 10 are not any of the demons we know about. We did kinda talk about this in our last Fiddlesticks video. So no matter how many demons you think are shown here, none of this is related to the first of 10. Or at least none of the things in the middle of this parchment. But we'll get to this later. Now let me explain what I said about the names in the middle. I don't think the names shown here represent different demons. If you see Delirium here, I don't think that's Shaco. And when you see Nightmares here, I don't think that's Nocturne.
I personally do. I think
that these are the names of the branches, an overall title for a specific kind of demons. And the individual demons are at the very bottom. So in the branch of Nightmares, we have 3 different manifested demons. And one of them is Nocturne. If this wasn't the case, I don't know what would be all the letters at the very bottom.
I have some ideas for that.
Which brings me back to the top. Since fear is at the very top, it feels like the primary aspect is fear as a raw emotion. So it could be fear that spawned all the demons. Because from fear we have delirium, because delirium is an outcome of fear. So are nightmares. And one could argue that you can fear the unknown, which could be linked to secrets. Delirium then separates into bliss and frenzy. Bliss because delirium can be linked to illusions, and in a sense bliss is a trick of a mind, and frenzy is the exact opposite of that, where you follow your own vision no matter what happens. Next to it we have nightmares directly spawning from fear, which makes sense. And then secrets separate to obsession, and then another branch that has no name.
And one thing that's important to keep in mind is that given that this is 5 years ago, he's probably developed more thoughts and opinions on this that he probably wouldn't even say the same thing about it at this point. So just remember that like, unless you're gonna remake a video on the same like topic every time you have a new idea or thought about it, it's just kind of it's unlikely. So yeah, he probably has like different ideas now, because now we know about Neela and some other things that were revealed after this with Yone and stuff. I feel like make it a little more clear what could be happening here.
I wonder if that's because the Noxians did not have a name for it yet. But either way, as I already said, at the very bottom, all of these demonic aspects that evoke raw emotions probably have their own demons. And as you can see, all of them combine to something titled Azakana. Or at least we think, because there is a question mark at the end. Which could mean that Azakana is like the great demon? You know, the combination of all negative raw emotions?
It actually would be the opposite, but yeah.
But I don't think we have any information on that yet. But now let's have a look at the pictures shown at the top, because there is another thing I discovered. You see how from fear in the middle, you have 3 branches that continue down to the rest of the demons? Well, from the left and right, you got 2 more branches that go down to the demons.
Sure.
So maybe fear as the primary raw emotion could be just one ingredient, and the demons of nightmares are spawned just from raw fear. But the demons of secrets are a spawn of fear combined with something else, and the demons of delirium are a combination of fear and something totally else. So let's have a look at these 2 extra ingredients that we assume are the reason why the demons spawned. Let's start with the keys on the left, because everyone already knows who we are going to talk about. You see, when Zoe was first released, They gave her a key on her belt because it was a nice reference to the old Fiddlesticks. Or at
And by the way, these keys, as I've mentioned here and there before, these keys are more than likely inspired by the keys of Solomon. And if you look into that, it's basically esoteric lore on like the portfolio's purpose and summoning of like demonic entities, if I'm not mistaken. So something to consider. If you just look into some of the visuals, keys of Solomon, you can kind of see similarities in some of the visual kind of clues used. I feel like the circles, the layers of it, the kind of esoteric symbolism that's used, tons of different symbols. Some of these actually look similar to the keys themselves that you see in the game, or in the art. So just something to think about regarding the inspiration for this concept.
least his old art, because later he was updated and the key was gone. So this was like a reference to the past. And originally I don't think it was supposed to have any meaning. But it seems like over time, Riot realized that they can actually make this canon, and they can use the key to actually link Zoe with Fiddlesticks.
Sure.
Not directly, but they can link her with his lore. And this is what we got. You see, the key shown here definitely matches the one Zoe has. Because unlike any other key we have in League, the handle of this key is the iconic half circle, which matches the one Zoe has. But then if we have a look at the new Fiddlesticks, he carries two full circle keys. So those are definitely different from the key shown here.
Yeah.
So what that made me think is that the keys are linked to the different vessels of Fiddlesticks. Because again, if you don't remember,
Yeah, that's an interpretation, perhaps. I think that they're personally related to the unlocking and awakening of certain greater demons, especially. So that's perhaps something to think about there. We do have some legends regarding the aspect of Twilight taking away something from Fiddle. Again, it's not written in a way that is seemingly objectively true. It's kind of a hearsay. This is kind of something that, you know, we say happened, but we don't necessarily know with certainty. But when you look at her art, that she's carrying one, it sure seems like that's true.
My theory is that the first of 10 relates to 10 different vessels around Runeterra, and these vessels are controlled by the demon known as Fiddlesticks. That's why the lore describes Fiddlesticks looking different in different regions. That's because there could be 10 different physical vessels. And I think that these keys are linked to them, because if you look at the picture, it actually shows 10 different keys. One with the half circle, which is the one.
I would also point out that 3 of those keys seem larger and more important than the others, and this one in particular looks quite similar to the symbol of Fiddlesticks when the art where the cage is like opened up and it's like coming up out of the top of it and you have that diamond looking symbol. That one looks quite similar to that. It could mean nothing, but these keys could perhaps each relate to a different greater demon. That's more like what I think is going on.
One Zoe has now. I still don't know why the new Fiddlesticks has 2 keys. It could be because he's the first of 10, and so he is special. Or maybe he took one of the keys from one of the other vessels. You see, that's why these are all just theories. Nothing is confirmed, so if you guys figure something out, you better let me know.
Maybe his vessels could be his skins. He has 8 at the moment. I really don't think that this is referring to that, because what Necrit doesn't know at this point is the existence of the other kings, right? Like Ashlash, which I'm going to incorporate into what I say. So I don't think that what Necrit is speculating here will turn out to be true. And that's okay, because there's a lot of other great things that he points out, so.
So just to summarize this, yes, it seems like Zoe is actually linked to Fiddlesticks. And it seems like the aspect of Twilight that is in charge of controlling Zoe did steal the key from a demon.
Makes sense. From the wiki, Zoe at some point took a key from Fiddlesticks. It is unknown what this key does, but one story as to Fiddlesticks' origin is a Targonian legend. Don't forget those words, you guys. That tells of how a child of Twilight stole the only joy from a ragged, whispering horror. Yeah, a very interesting line. It is a story, it is a legend. How literal that is, I think, should be left open to interpretation. But the idea of her taking a key, that stealing the joy away from whispering horror, presumably being Fiddlesticks, it's interesting because you don't really, probably wouldn't think of Fiddle as, being something that has joy. So, joy might make you think Ashlesh. It would be nice to have some more context on what that actually means.
Don't know why, but that seems to be the case. There is also this triangle with a dot in it, and this eye, but I have no idea what either of these are. I actually struggle to give these images an overall name, because again, the demons of Delirium are supposed to be spawned from fear, combined with whatever this is. This could be just physical realm, as in the keys represent physical vessels. But
the triangle is in the realm concept art? It sure is. Yeah, it sure is. Right there. And there's that skull right next to the secrets one, so that makes sense.
I'm not sure if Delirium would be the outcome of that.
Good catch,
But
Skag.
on the other side, we got something way more interesting. We got 10 different dots.
Oh, I can't wait to talk about this.
First of 10 makes sense, right? And in fact, one of the dots on the sides is red, which could be the first one. But then we wouldn't know what are the 3 dots in the middle.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that he's right. The red area that's being shown here represents this. Fiddle and the things kind of coming down from it.
Now I do actually have a theory as to what this could actually be. I think that these are celestial alignments. The 3 dots in the middle would be Runeterra, because Runeterra has a physical realm, spirit realm, and death realm.
Yeah, and I don't think that's correct. Pretty sure it's been made clear since that Mordekaiser and his death realm are in fact part of the spirit realm. And when you consider the entire purpose of the Spirit Blossom Festival being a way to commune with the spirits who have passed away, the people who have passed away that are in the spirit realm, I think that the separation of the spirit realm and the death realm is unnecessary. I think that they're essentially the same plane.
Are the 3 planes of Runeterra. And then there would be
when you read the wiki, it doesn't describe 3 planes, it describes 2. It describes the material realm and the spirit realm. There is no official acknowledgement of a death realm. So I can't agree with this interpretation personally.
Planets, and one of them would be red. You see, I didn't really think beyond this. But I still hope that the 3 dots actually represent Runeterra. Because if that was the truth, that would reveal the meaning behind Bard's mask.
It very well could. It's an interesting idea as well, because when I watched Arcane Season 1, I saw a little, celestial model hanging from the ceiling in Jace's room, and it did have 10 celestial bodies on it. Whether they were planets or moons of those planets certainly is open to interpretation, but there is Runeterra among 9 other celestial bodies. I did make sure to count them. So it could be a reference to that as well. And we'll talk more about how I interpret this chart.
Because Bard is the protector of Runeterra. He is making sure the mortal races don't wipe each other. So perhaps the mask represents Runeterra. If this isn't the case, the other theory is that perhaps there are 3 primary demons. Those are the 3 dots. And from those you got 7 lesser demons.
That is how I interpret it as well.
Them, marked red, would be Fiddlesticks.
Correct. That's what I think. Fiddle holding the keys to the other 10 demons because they're afraid of being jailed kind of makes sense. The key of joy being Ashlesh, and is why we see Ashlesh and not the others. Perhaps. Perhaps.
Which could still make sense, because remember, when Fiddlesticks is saying the first of 10, he is just copying someone's voice. So maybe some warlock once said that the first of 10 is one of the demons, but it doesn't necessarily have to be Fiddlesticks. But if that's not the case either, I have no idea what these dots could be.
I have a lot of ideas.
But either way, the overall name I would give this picture is Celestial. So the 2 ingredients to spawn the demons of secrets would be fear and celestials. Because, celestials give vision, I guess?
I don't think that the position of this circular section, I don't think that that's relevant. I don't think that because it's next to this that it contributes to this concept, personally. Yeah, just my 2 cents on that.
I'm saying that because, you know, Swain holds the Demon of Secrets.
Right.
And so that's the only reason why it would make sense. Again, if you notice something I didn't, feel absolutely free to tell me.
I will be happy to.
Hey, this is me from the future again. After I was done recording this video, someone tweeted at me something cool.
There you go.
It turns out that if you stitch together all the pieces of the demonic circle shown during Fiddlesticks' theme, it is actually the same circle as the one shown here.
That is such a sick thing that they did, man. That's so fucking cool. That is so fucking cool. I love how they did that. They didn't just give you the full picture, they made you work for it. That is sick, dude.
It even includes the 3 dots in the middle and 1 filled dot at the side. But what's even more peculiar is that the images around the middle dot fit the 3 origins. This is the exact same symbol as the one found in the middle of the circle that represents fear. You can start noticing how similar they are when you toy with the colors. There is also the eye, which I thought would be linked to secrets, but actually here it is drawn on the left side. Which means that the last symbol that looks like a human should be linked to the right side.
Yeah, the interpretation that it looks like a human is one thing. I think that, you know, we as humans tend to look for things that are familiar to us, faces in the clouds, shapes that aren't really there. So I would say that this has some different ways you could look at it. It almost looks like calipers for a forge. It almost looks like a pair of scissors. It's hard to say, but regardless, yeah.
Which is weird, because technically the picture would be referencing itself. Because it is this image that got us here. Either way, in the middle of these 3 is an extra symbol, and I think that one might be the Azakana, whatever that is. Since if you dribble down through the 3, that's where you get. But now, back to my past self.
Pareidolia, basically? What does that actually mean? I'm not familiar with that. A psychological phenomenon where people perceive familiar patterns, particularly faces, in random or ambiguous stimuli. Yeah. Yeah, I would say that that's essentially what it is.
But the last thing I wanted to mention, and this is the big one, is that if we look at what I assume are the specific names of specific demons written under each category, you can notice that some of them were crossed off, almost as if the demon that represents that category was swapped for another. You can notice that the demons of secrets have 3 names, nightmares have 2, delirium has 1, and fear has 7. When it comes to fear, this would support our theory of there being 10 Fiddlesticks vessels, because each name would represent a vessel that Fiddlesticks controlled, and every time he swapped to a different vessel, the primary demon of fear would swap. And now we are at number 7.
Could be them trying to figure out the demon's actual name. Some of these strokes look rather similar to each other, almost like they were rearranging the letters in the word.
Possibly. Again, this is totally a blind shot, and I have no idea if this is actually real. With that said,
could also be former demons who either were confused with these alignments, portfolios, or even killed and or replaced. Something to think about. Yeah, names contain power for sure.
Saying that these could be the primary demons of each category, but I'm still not sure if that's actually the case. Because remember, the demons are at the very bottom, presumably. So why would there be a...
We know because of Runeterra that Fiddle has multiple bodies around Runeterra. Well, I think I would look at it more as like how people perceive kindred. I don't know if Fiddle literally has different bodies or if it's more of a like a kindred perception thing. Silk, thanks for the Prime sub. What I mean is that, you know, you obviously have the bird form and the other horror form in Shurima. Those could be what these things are, and perhaps even different names associated with them. But I don't know. I don't know.
Name in the middle of the tree, with there being more demons at the very bottom. You see, this is why they said that this is a goldmine for theory crafters.
Absolutely.
There are so many little details that are meaningful. And even though I would say that I remember a lot of stuff about the world of League of Legends, I still can't crack nearly any of these. And what's even better, right now it doesn't seem like Riot has the intention of telling us what this actually is. They just released it for people to have fun. And I love this. Just remember that everything I said today is just a theory. That's what this is supposed to be. But also remember that, as I said, all the details here have a meaning. So if my theories went overboard, that was the point. Sometimes we need to go crazy to figure stuff out.
True.
There is still one thing that I have no idea what it actually is. Once again, for the fourth time, at the bottom, I assume we have all the demons. We have 3 in the Delirium branch, we have 3 in the Nightmares branch, and then we have 4 under Secrets.
Sure.
But out of these, only the first one is directly under Secrets, further down under Obsession. The other branch from that is empty. And beyond that, that branch has a tiny branch on top of it. So maybe there is a demon somewhere in the world that is 2 in 1. But what's peculiar is that between those, there is a branch that has 2 separate demons, but these are not connected to the rest of the overall branch. So I wonder if these 2 are just side demons.
And one of them
or
got
they were
scratched
created
out
by
too.
other factors. Maybe these 2 are Taumkench and Evelyn. Because without gluttony and lust, those 2 wouldn't exist. So maybe
Good
they
guess.
were just made by humans.
That makes sense.
But then again, Nocturne was as well. So I'm just mumbling nonsense here. I just wonder what the heck this means. But that's gonna be it for this one. Once again, it's just theories. I don't really know much more than you, and I guess we can all agree that the 1 branch and a half is probably Gragas and his barrel.
Yeah, dude, good video, good video. Okay, so here's what I would like to share with you. If we take a look at the imagery that we have available, there's some different. I always do this every single time I do this. There's some different renditions of it. See if I can get a larger image. A couple different things to consider alongside one another. So here is what I think. So because I've had the ability to listen to things like Yone's voice lines, and I've learned a little bit about things like Evelyn, here's what I think. I think that the tree, at least in Necrit's video, and he may have different ideas since this video, obviously, when like Neela came out and stuff like that, I think the tree is being looked at backwards. I think that, as suggested by Yone, that all demons start as Azakana. Here is why I believe that. It is a common trope, not only in fantasy, but also to a degree in religion, that everybody has demons inside of them. That demons are perhaps that humans, are perhaps the source of demons, mortals. That it's something bred from within ourselves, within our hearts. And that is exactly how I perceive Azakana. Azakana are very personalized, very specific demons. For instance, the masks shown for Yone, some of them, had labels. For instance, petty jealousy, right? That's something that you could certainly link to someone like Yasuo. Or even regret, which is a little bit more of a broad concept, but someone like Yone. Now, I think that, as Yone suggests when he sees Fiddle, is this what an Azakana could become? I think the answer to that question is yes. Azakana start small. They feed on the negative emotions of whomever they are attached to, because they are, more than likely, part of that person, a darkness from within them. It's something kind of like, you have to learn to overcome your demons. Demons being a rather spiritual thing, they're connected to those emotions. It's probably why they are so prevalent, especially through the use of the term Azakana in Ionia. And I think that what we're witnessing is that as you look at this chart and move up it, the demons are becoming more powerful. What happens is that, let's say, you can't overcome your demon, and instead your demon overcomes you. Well, what I think would happen as a result of that is like that demon would consume you, effectively turning you into it. It would take over you. You would become effectively a demon, or it would consume you. At that point, I believe the demon develops the ability to exist independently and to act on its own, no longer specifically bound to one person and their personal plights. As you move up this tree, the plights get less and less personal, don't they? What you'll notice as you move up is you go from very, very specific personalized experiences to the broader concepts. So you move into bliss, frenzy, obsession. These probably link and feed into each other to some respect, yes. But I don't think it starts at the top and moves down. I think it moves up. Ram would be among the strongest of demons, besides fear, Fiddle, on this chart. A little bit over delirium, and a little bit over nightmares. I do think that these are referring to specific demons, like Nocturne. And I want to clarify that there's some creatures and characters in the game who perhaps these could apply to. I don't know that much about Briar yet, but what I do know is that Briar's primary portfolio trait, if you will, is Frenzy. So I don't know if Briar is being inhabited or taken over by a demon, or exactly what's going on there, but I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. Delirium would actually potentially fit nicely with Shaco, after reading that earlier, and Bliss is essentially synonymous to Joy, but the thing is that Joy is one of the higher level demon kings. I do think that the way that the different branches move off could be relevant, but here's some thoughts for you. I do think that based on the imagery shown here, that the three entities that exist in the middle are greater than those that exist on the outside. I am of the opinion that the red highlighted circle represents Fiddlesticks, and potentially that which has descended from, goes down beneath him. Now, is it possible that things like delirium, bliss, and frenzy are the result of fear mixed with another primordial demonic emotion? Yes, it is. Here's my logic for how you get to what that is. If Fiddlesticks is the first of 10 and is represented by this red circle, I was considering the possibility that this ring should, to some degree, be looked at like a clock, okay? If you consider Fiddle the first and move backwards, it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And this is probably just coincidental, but Ashlesh is of the 7th layer of the underworld, is what they would say. It would not surprise me if Ashlesh goes right there, next to it. Hence the connection here to delirium, bliss, frenzy, etc. Now again, I don't necessarily know if I believe that Fiddle and Ashlesh in some way came together to create all these demonic entities beneath them. I think that that's an assumption that's kind of being made, and I wouldn't really go there with it. What I think is that these scholars are trying to make sense of something that they still don't really understand. That in some, like I said, I don't think it's growing down, I think it's growing up. Which could mean that they're trying to link the existence of certain things, which are a little more specific here, to greater concepts. So again, a high-level concept, a more broad emotion, would be something like joy. If Fiddle is the first, and Ashlesh is associated really in any capacity with the number 7, it is possible that she goes here, okay? With that being said, I do think that the three entities in the middle are even greater demons, and yes, more powerful than Fiddle. I think that there are things that we should probably consider as potentially more primal even than fear. One of them is hunger. One thing that I learned from the Otacon motion comic is that all demons of Runeterra, all of them, hunger. Okay? So I think that one of the most primordial feelings, perhaps to exist even before fear, to plague mortals would be hunger. Another one could be despair or hope. Another one could be curiosity. But if we think about what other concepts could exist along the outside here, I would think joy, rage, despair, envy, pride. These are all things that you should consider to go on the high-level demon scale. Fiddle is the tip of the iceberg. People make Fiddle out to be the end of it, but I don't really think that's the case. I think he's the tip of it. I think that as you move from a very self-specific emotion into something more broad, it will probably allow you to become more powerful, because you're no longer bound as an Azakana to one person's specific plight that they're enduring. You begin to exist as something more associated with overarching broad concepts, not the fear of abandonment, but fear. And that's the difference. That's what makes Fiddle so powerful compared to the contrasting Azakana, is the Azakana being such a personally aligned demon, it aligns with what your specific trauma or grief is. Whereas when you move up, it becomes a significantly grander concept, more aligning with the concept itself than an individual who is struggling with it. So I think, personally, that someone like Ram, through gaining additional power, like Evelyn, perhaps consuming demons, can help move you up this chart. And what we're looking at is a group of people trying to make sense of it. It is possible that some of these Azakana were meant to be associated with greater concepts like obsession and frenzy, and they changed their minds on some of them, perhaps scratching them out. This one has a box, drawn around it, so this could be very specific to an individual or a person. I don't know exactly what that word says, because you can't really read any of this besides the stuff that's written in red. But yeah, the basis of where I would take this is that this circular portion of the chart specifically is trying to show that there are 3 immensely powerful demons at the center, and 7, although high-level demons, still one step down from these. If you gather all the keys, you may be able to release these kings and the ones in the middle. Another interpretation, just to give you some food for thought, is the potential that the 3 in the middle contrast in some way the ones on the outside. The ones on the outside could very well be negative, right? Things like fear, rage, envy. But the ones on the inside could actually be positive. You could look at those as potentially joy. Ashlash is quite powerful, even though I do think it fits nicely to have Ashlash over here. You could have hope, and you could have curiosity. Things that are outwardly not clearly demonic, and don't even necessarily look demonic as we understand the typical demonic trope to appear, but something, love could be one of them as well. That's another great idea. I think love is another really good one. Things that you generally perceive to be positive that can be used perhaps in a negative way. What I'm trying to say is that perhaps like Darkin, as is being hinted at with Yunara, maybe not every demon is inherently evil, right? Maybe there are demons that can be associated with more positive emotions. I think Ashlash is essentially proof of this, right? I think that joy is pretty much the evidence that you need to make that claim. Now, how Neela is affected by that joy, yeah, it's a little bit disturbing. But what does Neela use it to do? She uses it to defeat great and powerful enemies, many of which would be immensely, dangerous for people to interact with, right? Yeah, just something to consider in terms of how you're looking at and understanding this chart. I just don't think that they showed this red one with the red, sigils and symbolism at the top for no reason. I'm pretty sure that that's what this represents, is Fiddle and those beyond. I really think you guys are blowing up how strong Fiddle is because you think the character's cool and he's very interesting, and I get that, but I don't think Fiddle is the most powerful form of demon. And even if you believe that fear is one of the most primal emotions, it's not the only one. So you don't just get to be like, well, it's fear, because you have fear, anger, disgust, sadness, joy. You have surprise, right? There's different charts that you can use to reference human emotion, right? It's not like the only first emotion that ever existed was fear. So I understand the first of 10 end of men, but that's also being interpreted. We don't know with objective truth exactly what that means, okay? So all I'm doing here is providing you a different perspective on what this could mean. Right? There are 8 on this chart, for instance. I think it really just depends on what chart you're looking at. This one has 7, right? So they could very well be associated with those 7. But what I don't think that you're going to be able to do is look up a chart like this on the internet and then just be like, yeah, that's the answer. I don't think that's the case. There's always a creative spin that they take and put on these things. So again, they even highlight this circle when they're showing, going through that video like Necrit proposed. I really do think that this is where Fiddle belongs, and that's where he goes. Now, let's just play with a couple different ideas here. If Fiddle's the first of 10 End of Men, and Ashlesh is another one, it makes me wonder if all of the 10 kings are currently still sitting kings. And by that I mean, could they have been defeated, destroyed, forgotten, such so that someone else could claim the mantle? I think that's a very fun concept to play around with. So a demon like Ram may be trying to work its way up the ladder, or something like Atakan, working its way up the ladder to try to become a more powerful demon or fill the empty throne of a king, I think would be kind of fucking cool. That would be fun. It gives demons a longer end game, something to like work towards. Not just, oh, I'm a demon and this is what I am and this is all I can ever be. The idea that maybe they can move up. If I had to pick Atakan being a demon of something, I'm going to be honest, I would probably pick Rage. The reason why is, I have a couple reasons. One of them makes sense and the other one doesn't. One, Atakan gets mad pretty easily, so there's that. He doesn't like to be bound, and he sure is pissed off at LeBlanc. Also, he's voiced by the same guy who voiced N'Zoth in World of Warcraft, who is particularly known for his rage. That probably has absolutely no bearing on it whatsoever, but I would not be surprised if Atakan goes somewhere there. I would also consider him potentially being related to hunger. It is something that feeds out in the wasteland, out in the areas where you shouldn't go, right? That's where LeBlanc found it. It drew it to, she drew it to her by giving it something to feed on, essentially, in the Bringer of Ruin Atakan motion comic. But I also like Rage specifically because Atakan was bound to Katash Lee, who is historically known as a warrior. Warriors often rely on their bloodlust and rage during battles. You see this with Tryndamere specifically. It's also a common thing in World of Warcraft that warriors' base class resource is, in fact, rage. I think that's a pretty common like fantasy trope as well, so Atakan being related to rage would not be that surprising. If Atakan were one of the 10 kings and is able to be bound not just by Mordekaiser and the helmet, but by LeBlanc and what appears to potentially be blood magic, that's pretty crazy that LeBlanc has the capacity to bind something like that. We see her use black and red chains on it in the Bringer of Ruin comic, and we see her with the black and red chains on it in the Bite Marks cinematic at the end. Or Dark Gambit, perhaps even. But I digress. That's not really the point. What I'm really trying to say all of this for you guys is not to say that this is the way that it is, but to get people to consider an alternate perspective, because I think that could be useful. And just a different set of eyes on this, because it is, in fact, a speculation goldmine. It really, really is. Now, if Joy did exist over here to the left of where Fiddle is positioned, then, again, Delirium and Bliss do make sense if these are connecting to a greater framework. It makes me wonder what would go over on the right side of Fiddle. Would that be something like Curiosity? Would that be something like Envy? You have Obsession and Secrets in that same line, so I'm just curious. There's so much room for growing the demons in Runeterra and opening up the door on what exactly they are and where they come from, that I think that it's just fun to interpret and speculate and think about. So those are, I think, generally my thoughts on this chart. And I would like to just kind of point something out in regards to Fiddlesticks, because I find that there's just kind of a lot of what appears to be perhaps misinformation spread about Fiddlesticks. there's a lot of people who I think don't consider, and I was saying this earlier, I don't think they consider perspective enough, and the context of how information is delivered. They will sometimes read a line and just be like, oh, okay, that's the answer, okay? Could the non-filled out circles mean that they're no more? It very well could. It very well could. Positions to be filled. Ashlesh filling another one of them, for instance. So I just like the idea of vying for kingship among other demons. So like being a demon and like wanting to become more powerful, to become one of the kings, and to get that position. So here's just some different information that I would like you to listen to. I'd like to give you this information because I think that this is something that flies under the radar with Fiddlesticks far too often. I said here on one of my most recent videos, the one regarding Fiddlesticks, is story. I have some entries here regarding the origins of Fiddlesticks that I highly recommend that everyone take a look at. Consider whether or not what you're reading is written in an objectively factual manner, or if it's more like a story or a tale. This is what the Universe website says, telling us tales from Runeterra itself. Long ago, in a tower by the edge of the sea, a foolish young mage summoned something into the world that he was not prepared to control. What stepped before the boy was something older than recorded history, something darker than a yawning, starless night, something the world had desperately tried to forget. And in an instant, the mage, the creature, and the tower itself were lost to all of time. At least that's what the stories say. When they write things like this, you guys, you're supposed to recognize that this is not an objectively factual statement. Unfortunately, there are several of these written that people treat as objectively factual statements, I've noticed in the comments. To continue, in the Freljord, children frighten each other around the fire with tales of a monster that raises itself from untended graves in the ice, its body a shambling mass of helmets, bucklers, fur, and wood. In Bilgewater, drunken sailors trade accounts of something standing alone on a tiny, distant atoll from which no one has ever returned. An old Targonian legend speaks of how a child of Twilight stole the only joy from a ragged, whispering horror, while veteran Noxian soldiers prefer the fable of a lonely farmhand who was blamed for a poor harvest and fed to the crows, later returning to the world as a demon. Demacia, Ishtal, Piltover, Ionia, Shurima, in every corner of Runeterra, these myths persist, reshaped, respun, and passed down by countless generations of storytellers. Stories of a thing that looks almost human and stalks places thick with fear. But these are simply fables to frighten young children. No one would ever be afraid of a silly old monster called Fiddlesticks. Until now. In the wake of this revival, another tale, nearly lost to memory, has seen a resurgence throughout the hinterlands. A legend of a great evil that has no form, no thoughts, and no understanding of the world it inhabits, instead building itself into the crude shape of those that fear it. The terror of all living things, given life in that first terrible scream of creation. A demon before demons were known. Now, people will often reference, oh, it's from the first scream of creation. Well, they're conveniently overlooking that this is a tale and a legend. Now, typically tales, legends, myths have a seed of truth. There's probably some truth in there, right? Having no understanding of the world it's in, building itself into the crude shape of those that fear it. I like those aspects of it. But given life in the first terrible scream of creation, now see, I think that's being taken far too literally, and here's why. Information from the wiki to follow up. The origin of Fiddlesticks is shrouded in mystery and filled with myths, tales, and horror stories that have risen theorizing about its origin. One such story is that Fiddlesticks was accidentally released by a mage tampering with powers beyond their understanding, as I read before. A story from Noxus depicts Fiddlesticks as an innocent farm boy who was blamed for a bad harvest and fed to the crows that came back as a demon. Despite no shortage of stories and theories, no one truly knows where Fiddlesticks came from. But there are some things that we do allegedly know, chat, about the creation of Runeterra. For instance, as an unknown group of beings began forging Runeterra with the world runes, two separate realms came into existence simultaneously. This is worded strangely because it makes it sound like there are three versions of Runeterra, but it doesn't highlight three, it only says two. You have the physical realm, acting as the material manifestation of Runeterra. This is everything that we see, unless you're Shen or someone like that. Everything that we see. And this plane is the source of all elemental magic, and eventually the home to many mortal races and other forms of life. It's all where Noxus is, it's where Demacia is, it's where Shurima is, it's all the physical stuff that we see. Although there is magic in it. The spirit realm, a parallel pocket of existence where time and space are more obscure, acts as the source of all spiritual magic on Runeterra. The Glade, being the oldest pocket of raw primordial magic within the spirit realm, was probably created at this time. During the very early years of Runeterra's existence, the first instances of life appeared within Runeterra's spirit realm, that being the various forms of primordial spirits. The primordial spirit gods like Nagakeburos and the Grey Man come to govern over concepts like life and death. The first primordial demons, the 10 Kings, which included Fiddlesticks and Ashlesh. So, if what I'm interpreting from this is correct, it appears that we're being presented with several legends, myths, and resurfaced tales. These may have grains of truth in them, but I would caution against taking them so literally. Based on the alleged creation of Runeterra, material and spiritual, the lines about Fiddle coming from the first scream of creation don't make any sense. The exact remark is rooted in a tale, something subjective, and likely to have an unreliable narrator. It seems that as suggested by Yone and the demonic compendium, the Azakana, the Ionian word for demons, are minor demons, generated from the negative emotions and grief of mortals. They are personal plights which, if not overcome, can swallow the mortal and grow into more powerful, independent demonic entities, like Evelyn. Your darkness basically consumes you and turns you into a demon. From there, one can consume and gain even greater power, until eventually reaching the king status like Fiddlesticks. However, that is just my 2 cents, my interpretation of the lore as I understand it thus far, and an opinion that is highly subjective and probably also wrong. So, just some things to think about. Ashlesh also has, or Neela also has lines to Fiddle that she knows what he really is and how to kill him. And if you were to kill Fiddlesticks, I do wonder if something would be able to take its place if it had enough power. One of the demons that appears closest to being able to accomplish that is Rom, Demon of Secrets. I don't feel hopeful for Swain, even though I know very little about him so far. I'm very concerned for his well-being and what he is getting himself into. With that being said, I have a couple other abstract thoughts that are completely unprovable, but something that I thought would be fun for world building. If, for instance, maybe the 10 Kings were the Celestials' first shot at making ascended god warriors, rather than perhaps using an artifact to have them siphon power straight into beings or using them as vessels as they do in Mount Targon. It would be interesting if the emotions of either the Celestials themselves or some kind of primal power got out of control, and the Celestials, in an age unknown to us, had to imprison them deep within some kind of slumber in the spirit realm. But again, there's no proof of that whatsoever. It would be an interesting parallel to the Darken, though, as something that was kind of indirectly created by the Celestials grew too powerful and corrupt and then had to be locked away. But again, no proof of that whatsoever, just a thought that I had that I thought would be kind of fun or cool to consider. And I would also throw out the idea that if a demon is great enough, although he is generally the embodiment of fear, there could be more literal connections or access to power that Fiddle is aware of, like the names of the demons, secrets or something like that, or being able to go into people's dreams and, do nightmare stuff as opposed to Nocturne. Just something to think about. Like, what is the actual power portfolio that should be considered here? How broad is it? How specific is it? Where I feel like as you get up the chart, you're getting more into broad concepts, whereas Azakana, like I said, are very, very specific. And when Yone, so Zielis says, when Yone looks at Fiddle, would it not be safe to assume as well that since Yone only knows of demons and Azakana in Ionia, would look at it all through an Ionian way? Sure. Also, from what I read in the lore, I think Azakana might not really need to, per se, latch onto a person. I think if they fail, that person may just be able to latch onto another one with the same kind of emotions. Much like the newest animation where they jump from one thing to the next. It's a great question. I'm unsure. I'm not even sure if what we're seeing in that is exactly the same thing as Azakana. The reason why I reference Azakana is because rather than, creating or commanding some kind of demonic entity as depicted in the Yunara stories, Azakana, again, that is an Ionian term for a lesser, very personalized demon, okay? So what we see, for instance, in the Path cinematic is Azakana. It's literally born from the rage of the older brother of Yone, right? We literally see it manifest as a result of it. So I'm very much of the opinion that Yone basically manifested his demon and then fought it and became physically bound to it in a way that we have not seen previously. Don't focus too much on the use of the word Azakana, because, again, that is an Ionian term that probably is just more of a representation of a personalized emotional demon. So just something to consider. Do you think demons are manifestations of the emotions, or are they just creatures that feeds on those emotions? So I personally prefer the interpretation that the lowest level of demons, what we refer to as Azakana, are, in a magical, spiritual sense, created from the grief of mortals. Like, what Yasuo is confronting in the cinematic is part, in a way, it's a spiritual living manifestation of Yasuo's grief. And it wants to feed on him, to overtake him. Now, you could interpret it as they're existing spiritual beings that come and feed on something that already exists, but again, I kind of prefer the other interpretation, that they are something born of people. And the reason why I like that mostly is because not only have I seen 2 examples that seem to portray that, but it's the concept that, like, we all have dark sides, right? We all struggle with some kind of demon. And if you don't admit what your demon is, it's probably pride. So, whether you struggle with sadness, anger, pride, envy, fear, everyone has their own inner demons. And I think, based on my own personal philosophy, that part of our journey in life is overcoming those demons. Because if you don't, they will consume you and destroy you. They will destroy who you can be, what you can become, because that darkness that is part of you is, you didn't have maybe the will to address it and fight it, or you didn't have the support structure that you needed to go through it, right? Like in the case of Yasuo, he needed his brother, where Yone was able to confront it himself and become bound with it, not really overcoming it, but being one with it. Yasuo had the support of Yone, as Yone had kind of always wanted to as the older brother, right? He wanted to support him in this way. I would also highly recommend considering the possibility, especially based on the appearance of Ashlesh, that just because to you something doesn't look like a demon, that doesn't mean that it's not a demon. Demons are apparently spiritual in form and in the root of their existence. So anything that is spiritual could, in fact, without you even realizing it, be a demon. Remember that Fiddle does remark to Kindred and calls them Gray Man. So that could just be another reference to what Kindred was before, but I'm not going to step on your Kindred lore because I don't want to make you guys rage, okay? So just consider that other spiritual entities, although they don't outwardly look like demons, could in fact be some kind of demon. Not saying that that's the case with Kindred, I was just using it as a fun example. So that's just my interpretation of it. I don't know enough about Briar to again make the claims about Frenzy, but what I do know is that Briar is very much aligned with the concept of Frenzy. I'm pretty sure Briar even has abilities that are called Frenzy. Now, you guys said in the comments, so please allow me to address this. Some of you were saying Briar is a sort of a golem, a construct formed with hemomancy. Is that correct? Because if that is, if you're looking for the potential connection between blood magic and demons, it's Briar. So anyways, just something to think about regarding that. I'll have to learn more about Briar and see if my thoughts change on that. I will also address one other theory and idea that a couple of you have said, that it is possible that the Celestials themselves feared something like the Watchers or whatever, and that the demons could have been original manifestations of something from those Celestials. Sure, I would say perhaps that's possible. From my perspective, though, and this is very much World of Warcraft tainted in my ways of thinking, so I will acknowledge this, emotions and that kind of plight is often something that I personally consider to be more associated with mortals. And if I'm not mistaken, Skag, what's that quote from Rom when he interacts with a demon in League of Legends? I'm gonna have to get to Swain sooner than later because his relationship with Rom is very important for how we understand and interpret this stuff. Because it seems like almost like a pact has been made there, similar to Yunara and her Darkin. So it's starting, in my opinion, they're really starting to blur the line between Darkin, what exactly that is, Kanmei, Azakana, demons, etc. This quote, shaped by humanity, a reflection. That doesn't mean necessarily originally created by humanity, but shaped by humanity, a reflection of us. And that's why I believe that demons initially start as a spiritual manifestation of our own inner turmoil, and that they can overcome us and physically and spiritually consume us and become more and more and more powerful. Also, purely based on what Neela says, Fiddle is killable. There is a way to kill it, and that is more than likely, as many of you have suggested as well, rooted in understanding their full name, their real name. Names, especially in the case of demons in this universe, have power, right? So understanding the actual true name, I think, is the key to defeating them.